My amendment to this spending bill will be to cut 2% across the board so we could actually be responsible and try to balance our budget. Most people that I talk to at home, or people who come up here who are seeking assistance from the federal government, say, well, that doesn't sound too bad, 1 or 2%, we could deal with that. People come to me and they say, well, you know, my group is doing this great research for this disease that affects all these people. And I say, well, how much are you getting? They say, well, $100 million. And I say, well, we have $1 trillion deficit, and everybody ought to try to spend what comes in rather than spending money we don't have. Does it make sense, even for a good cause, to borrow money from China to spend money we don't have? And most of them, even groups that live at the federal trough, groups that need and want, and all they come for is federal money, say, well, that's not that unreasonable. We got $100 million last year. Could you take $98 million for the good of the country? Instead of getting $100 million, could you take $98 million, 2% less, in order to balance the budget, in order not to destroy the country with all of this debt? And interestingly, whether these groups are from the left, the right, the center, Republican, Democrat, Independent, most of them look at me and nod their heads. I think the groups that receive federal money realize that this massive deficit that we have is destroying the country. Even the groups receiving it are willing to cut 1 or 2%. But you know who's not? The Senate, the Congress. They won't cut anything. So my bill today, my amendment to add a 2% cut to this spending, will get 15 or 20 votes. Not one Democrat will vote for this bill. And you know what the Democrats will say? Oh, the deficit is because you cut taxes. This is something that is factually incorrect. We did cut taxes, but guess what? Revenue's up. This is a fact. We cut the tax rates, but the economy is growing gangbusters and revenue is up. Why do we have a massive deficit? Why are we breaking records? Why in February did we have more deficit added than at any time in our history? Why are we now about to bust $1 trillion in deficit this year? It's spending. It isn't revenue. Revenue is up. We did cut tax rates, and companies are growing like they haven't grown in decades. The biggest problem in our country right now, if you talk to businesses, or they can't find enough people to work for them. There's a labor shortage in our country. It's a great time to be a worker in our country. But this will not pass. My amendment won't pass because people are afraid that the public won't like them if they don't give them more money. I'm afraid we'll destroy the country if we keep running more deficits. The deficit's growing 8% a year. Spending's only growing 4.5%, 5% a year. The deficit's growing more rapidly because we've accumulated so much. We have over a $22 trillion deficit. This year, the interest is over $300 billion. But as it grows faster and faster, the interest will exceed what we're spending on the military within about 5 years. And nobody's doing anything about it. 5 years ago, we passed spending caps. It was called the sequester. And it went on for a while and actually was reducing the deficit. But then you say, well, whose fault is it that we've got this massive deficit, this massive spending? Is it Republicans or is it Democrats? The answer is yes. Both parties are fiscally irresponsible, but it has nothing to do with taxes or revenue. Revenue's going up dramatically. It has to do with spending. And both parties are guilty of this. The Republicans want unlimited military spending, and the Democrats want unlimited welfare spending. And people say, well, there's not enough compromise in Washington. Absolutely untrue. Absolutely misreported by the media. There's too much compromise here. The compromise is always to spend more money and to spend money we don't have. So the military gets their money, unlimited, and the welfare state gets unlimited spending. Republicans and Democrats both join hands together, and what happens around here on a day-to-day basis is compromise to spend money we don't have, to borrow it from China, sometimes to send it back to China. You realize we send economic development aid to China? How ridiculous is that? But we send money all around the world. Many of these countries that get money don't like us. They hate us. They burn our flag in the street, and yet we send them money. But we're not even sending our own money. We borrow it from China to send it out. I think this is a very reasonable proposal. Some will say it's draconian, but you know what? if they passed my amendment today and we cut spending by 2%, we would still be spending more money than we spent 2 years ago. We'd be spending $19 billion more than 2 years ago. If we pass my 2% cut, the 2-penny cut that I'm proposing, we would still be spending more money than the caps that the vast majority of the Senate voted on 5 years ago. Why is the deficit burgeoning? Whose fault is it? Is it Republicans? Is it Democrats? The answer is yes. Both parties are acting fiscally irresponsible, has nothing to do with tax revenue, and has everything to do with spending. People say the people want it, but do the people want a bankrupt country? Do they want a country that's being eaten from the inside out? Do they want this reckless spending that someday will lead to a day of reckoning? No, I think we have to get our house in order, get our budget in order, and I think we need to balance our budget. If my amendment were to pass, a 2% cut, how many families have had to deal with 2% less? How many businesses in bad times have to cut their budget by 2%? If the government were today to pass my amendment, 2% cut, that means you get 98% of everything they're spending. We'd balance the budget within 5 years. That's ostensibly what many Republicans say they're for. We've had a vote for a balanced budget, and everybody lines up, and all the Republicans vote for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution that says the budget will balance within 5 years. But then when given the opportunity to vote for spending cuts, we lose half the Republicans. The Democrats don't care. They will not vote for spending cuts, but Republicans at least profess to be for spending cuts, and yet when we offer a modest proposal like this, we lose half the Republicans. There is a problem with deficits. Both parties share some guilt. What I put forward today, though, is an opportunity for senators who truly believe the deficit is a problem to try to restrain spending with a 2% cut across the board. I hope senators will consider voting for this amendment. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I yield back time.